Harris, and I'm an instructional designer with Teaching and Learning with Technology, which is a central group inside of Rutgers University. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how the Rutgers School of Public Health is piloting the Canvas Outcomes tool in order to assess their course design and their teaching effectiveness. I'm going to continue by introducing all of the members of our research team. So this project was funded by a Rutgers Research Seed Grant. And I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Marian Passanante, who is the Associate Dean for Educational Program Development and Global Programs at the Rutgers School of Public Health, Dr. Laura Liang, who is the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, and Dr. Vince Silenzio, who is a professor in the Urban Global Public Health program. I also worked with Linda Lopez, who is an e-learning support specialist who reports directly to our School of Public Health and provides faculty with a lot of wonderful one-on-one support in their teaching and their delivery of courses in multiple modalities. Again, I'm Karen Harris. I'm an instructional designer in a central group called Teaching and Learning with Technology at Rutgers, and we report to the Division of Continuing Studies. So I'm going to start by speaking about some of the specifics of the School of Public Health, in particular, their MPH degree comes with competencies that are already determined by CEEF, which is short for or an acronym for the Council on Education for Public Health. This group is an independent agency that is recognized by the U.S. Department of Education to accredit schools of public health and public health programs, as well as those that are outside schools of public health at the bachelor's and graduate degree levels, including programs that are offered via distance education. All accredited schools and programs in public health, I want to start by letting you know, all of them must address 22 Master of Public Health foundational competencies that are identified by CEEF. So assessment is already looking toward alignment with these 22 MPH foundational competencies. In addition, concentration-specific competencies that are developed by specific schools and programs and assessments that are linked to those competencies have been identified. So in this example, 12 Rutgers School of Public Health concentrations that they have developed, each have anywhere from 5 to 7 competencies that are specific to those concentrations. Again, the Rutgers School of Public Health has 12 concentrations. And in addition to those, the Rutgers School of Public Health has MS and doctoral programs that each have specific competencies. So already, again, if you're getting a picture of the Rutgers School of Public Health, everything already has a framework developed for instruction and assessment to be aligned with competencies. In this presentation today, I'm going to switch back and forth between the term competency and the term outcome, because we were using the Canvas Outcomes tool and populating it with these School of Public Health competencies, which again in Canvas you call them outcomes. And we built a framework to model and fit what has been established already in the School of Public Health, again using the Canvas Outcomes tool. This specific research project had goals and objectives. So the project goal was for us to use this Canvas Outcomes tool to gather learning insight data that is based on these competencies in order to assess student learning outcomes at the course, the concentration, and the program level. So our goal was to, in order to do this, was to build a framework inside of Canvas Outcomes, linking the CEEF required MPH degree program foundational competencies, and for this particular research, global public health concentration specific competencies, and linking them to the student mastery of the course material. Again, this specific objective to build the framework in Canvas outcomes, and that was something that I could do, as well as the e-learning specialist could work on that. But at the same time, we were also going to train a subset of Rutgers School of Public Health faculty to utilize Canvas rubrics and the Canvas outcomes tool together, to leverage them together, and also at the same time to norm the assessment of student mastery. So again, building the framework in Canvas outcomes was part one, and the next level was to again train the faculty at the School of Public Health to use that framework within Canvas. And then the faculty would be able to, as well as leadership, would be able to analyze student mastery data. And this, for this research, it was implemented during the spring 2021 semester. The project scope, it's important to note that the data collection that we made was limited to core and required courses that were taught specifically by primary faculty for one concentration, and that was global public health. So again, it was just core required courses and one concentration, global public health. And this was, again, to narrow our scope so we could get a sense of the data before we would expand it to additional concentrations. Our first preliminary goalposts in this, we worked to establish buy-in first from the concentration director. And we also were working on developing an online MPH in global public health. So this was an area we could tap motivation. And finally, goalposts, if successful, we were hoping that this framework might allow us to assess attainment of competencies in both the online and in-person MPH Global Public Health degree, which, if we could do this, would inform quality control between the two modalities. The idea is that we could propose this framework to offer equivalent assessment of competencies in both an online degree program and an in-person degree program in the MPH in global public health. In the initial phase of this research, from September 2020 to December 2020, we were implementing a beta test. So task one was to input the Master of Public Health core and concentration specific competencies in the Canvas outcome tool. So again, the first piece was to build the competencies in the Canvas outcomes tool. And in the Canvas outcome tool, we could organize the competencies so that they would be easier to access and import into the courses. Task two was to collect all spring 2021 syllabi for the particular courses that we were going to be working with. From there, we would be looking at the competencies and the assessments that we would be working on as we collaborated with the faculty who were part of this research. Task three would be to work with the faculty members to develop rubrics that would assess mastery of the competencies. So the rubrics we were developing were to be added to those assignments or assessments that were in their syllabi. For task four, we would be linking assessments in in this case, there were 6 core courses. So we were linking the assessments in those core courses to each of the required linking assessments to competencies. And task 5, finally, we were going to train a subset of Rutgers School of Public Health primary faculty to norm student assessment of mastery. and also to utilize the outcome summary reports that would be generated in Canvas. So this was a fairly large undertaking. So one of the pieces of it was that we needed to keep track of our progress. So we had multiple core courses as well as global public health concentration courses. And we had instructors who were teaching those courses. So we were, again, in advance of spring 2021, we were working directly with faculty to put everything into place. So if you can see here, we used Microsoft Teams as a means to keep track of all of the courses, the instructors, and what point they were at in the effort to implement Canvas outcomes. We would have them meet with me. We would import competencies into their courses. We would also add the competencies to their rubrics. Prior to doing that, I was coaching faculty in the development of their rubrics as well. So we would meet regularly to see where everyone was along the timeline of this project so that we would be prepared to implement it in spring 2021. And during the process, we were working hard to create a community of faculty. Again, this is a pretty large undertaking, and there was not only just work to be done, but also there might be some skepticism of the value of the work. So we put an effort into creating a community of faculty. We had meetings where everyone was present and we covered topics that were important for the progress of this research. So as you can see, we had all the faculty members involved in preparation, working together for spring 2021. A big piece of building this faculty community was starting with building some faculty development. And that's where I came in. And I did a number of training sessions as well as one-on-one work with the instructors to become very familiar with, to really actually take a deep dive into understanding or thinking about why they might want to implement rubrics in their courses. So as you can see here, this is a slide pulled directly from the professional development, where I explained that a rubric is a tool for assessment, and that there are 3 guiding features. And I worked with faculty to develop each of the features of their resumes. So we would work to brainstorm the performance criteria for evaluation. We would talk through how to develop qualitative definitions that would align with each criterion. And we would also work on the scoring strategy and how that could be developed to reflect whatever scoring they were already using. I worked very hard to communicate that rubrics could be a means for delivering formative evaluation and formative feedback, and that rubrics would not be designed for every assignment, but only for those that were more significant or more complex. And also speaking to the idea that these tasks should be authentic ones. And last but not least, once we would develop these criteria for the assessments that they were going to use that aligned with the competencies that we were tracking, I would explain how competencies or outcomes could be added to the rubrics, and what they are, and how to actually use them when assessing student mastery. The key explanation is that including learning outcomes or competencies is a means for making an inference about the student's mastery of skills or competencies. So again, you can see here in this rubric, there are two parts to it. There's the criteria for the assignment, which is going to have very specific criteria that really reflect what's expected, what kind of demonstration of skills and knowledge, but that this is a bigger picture along a learning path, that the competencies, again, are an inference of program level outcomes. So speaking about rubrics, it's important to reflect on what rubrics are measuring. So this can be a little bit of a complicated representation, but I want to emphasize that for the most part, when we build rubrics, and I've worked with faculty building rubrics, the focus has been on student performance. So the idea is that when you build a rubric, you are creating criteria and you're looking to see how the student performs based on that list of criteria. And they can be informative assessments or summative assessments. But again, the focus is usually on student performance. By adding competencies, I explained that the rubric can measure more than student performance. It can also be measuring instructional effectiveness. So this is where we are adding these learning outcomes, and we are determining whether students are mastering content. We can then reflect when we've done this act, when we've made this assessment, we can reflect on our course content, on our course design, on our course delivery, and we can even make bigger picture recommendations and maybe impact our curriculum design or our curriculum mapping. So again, the idea is that a rubric is more than criteria that are established for a particular assignment in a particular course. They can incorporate competencies that then can give us some insights into the effectiveness of our instruction. To convince faculty to use rubrics, because it does take a great deal of time to develop them, and it takes time also to implement them. I make sure to give a complete rationale of why we would be implementing rubrics. That rubrics will benefit students by communicating instructions that directly reflect the instructor's expectations. They communicate transparent grading. They can offer a framework for the students to reflect on their performance and perform self-remediation. And they also can, in this case, they can connect assessments in a course to program level learning. So students will see those connections. So again, rubrics benefit students in all these ways, but they also benefit instructors and TAs by offering transparent and consistent grading, implementing that consistent grading scale. Rubrics really enforce objectivity and grading equity, because you have already given students the criteria, so everyone is getting their scores and their feedback based on the same criteria. Rubrics also provide a framework for delivering very targeted feedback, because we can very easily give feedback criteria by criteria. So it really provides that space. And it can be automated and time efficient when we are building these rubrics within a learning management system. And finally, rubrics benefit administrators because they can connect those assessments at the course level to program level goals, objectives, and competencies. They also will provide consistent agreed upon metrics for student attainment of those competencies for accreditation. And they offer a vehicle for norming outcomes. All of that is a big explanation of rubrics, what they are, how to build them, the rationale for using them. But I like to be sure that I give some quick recommendations for rubric development, so we're all on the same track, developing, relatively similar rubrics. So making recommendations of 3 to 5 criteria, that each criterion should represent a key skill or attribute, and try to avoid any overlap. Detailed characteristics should be available. So the idea is you're going to create a short description and a long description for each criterion. And each one should be, of course, teachable. Qualitative descriptions across the scale should be consistent. It shouldn't be, that there are great differences from one grade scale level to the next. And of course, tone and language is appropriate so that everybody understands what's being expected. I've offered faculty a meta rubric. So if they are looking for feedback, I'm happy to give feedback on their rubrics. And I've given very detailed feedback, but I also have this rubric available so that they can reflect on their own rubric design. So again, it's a meta rubric. So I've given them a rubric for them to evaluate the rubrics that they're developing. Moving forward, outcomes in Canvas. In the Rutgers School of Public Health, we have an example here of a capture from a syllabus. So all curricula for degree programs at the School of Public Health, as we had said earlier, are based upon competencies. And faculty are required in their syllabi to link assessments to competencies. And from this example, I'm hoping you're seeing that we have an example of assignment 1, your independent survey project proposal. And listed, we have 3 of the competencies that are addressed by this assignment. So again, in the syllabus, the students have already hopefully made this connection, this link. They see the competencies that are, again, directly aligned with this assignment. And this is in the syllabus. So faculty will then use this to create a rubric to evaluate student performance on this assignment or an assessment, and they will be adding those linked competencies to the rubrics. The Canvas Outcomes tool enables academic administration and faculty to track students' progress in mastering the competencies. So the idea, again, is if we're adding these competencies that are addressed in the assignments to the rubrics during student grading, as faculty will rate students on these competencies, the outcomes tool will then populate with the ratings so that students' progress will be something that we can see in data, and Canvas actually creates some visualization of the data for us. And here, this is Dr. Passanante's example of a rubric that she built in Canvas for her course. And as you can see, we have the criteria here are listed. So I'm hoping you can see now in the rubric what the criteria looks like for the rubric. And then at the end, at the bottom of the rubric, we have the learning outcomes or the competencies listed. Now, as I had said initially, in one of the first steps, or the first step, was to populate Canvas with these competencies. So we would have the competencies already available for the instructor to just navigate to the list of competencies and pull in the ones that are appropriate for this particular assignment. You should see also that the competencies do not add or subtract points in the assignment rubric. So the idea is, as you can see, if you're grading navigating through this student looks like they've gotten, yes, a perfect score. So you can see all the points that were added as the rubric was clicked through, as it was completed. And you can see here that even though only meets expectation or is approaching expectations was selected, no points were added or deducted. I do want you to note as well, though, in this Canvas rubric, these little boxes that look like speech bubbles, this is where instructors can give comments. Again, we were speaking about those targeted granular feedback based on criteria. So each criterion offers this space where we could click on these comments and we could give direct feedback to the students. And the learning outcomes or the competencies, there's also the potential to give feedback. Now, for this research project, we needed to develop a learning mastery scale. And that is what you can see represented here. This was done and agreed upon prior to implementing this project. And as we said, the first step, adding competencies, we also needed to be sure that there was a mastery scale that was consistent for each competency, and that we identified a level that would be considered mastery. So creating that learning mastery scale was the first part. The second part was to then consider that we needed to be certain that faculty would be using the scale consistently from one instructor to the next. So this, again, was another piece of our building a faculty community because we had meetings to norm how faculty would be assessing learning. And this was really a creative effort by the members of this research team to figure out a way to really communicate what each mastery level looked like. So I found it very interesting, and I was glad to work with instructors who have a sense of humor. But we were choosing to illustrate it visually. So of course, an instructional designer wants to express things in every modality possible. So we decided to have a visual representation. So if our students are exceeding expectations, we're considering that they are demonstrating mastery above and beyond their degree level. And we gave an analogy of the safe landing on the Hudson River. But meets expectation, which is our mastery threshold, was a smooth landing. Approaching expectations might be a little bit of a bumpy landing. You know, they're demonstrating a developing mastery. So again, this is a creative piece where we want to be sure that we've got everyone interpreting the scale as closely as possible to the next person. So we've been talking a lot about competencies and adding them to rubrics, and we've spoken about the scale and norming the scale. And now we're going to take a look. You know, we talked about the rubrics on one side where everything goes in. Now we're looking at the mastery report. So this is the output. This is our data insight. So again, once those competencies are put in place in the rubrics, this is the data that is generated during grading. So what you're looking at is the Learning Mastery Gradebook, which again is generated automatically using the Canvas Outcomes tool. If you take a look at this particular one, you're going to note that there's a competency, Epidemiology 3, that all students are approaching expectations. And you'll see there's an explanation that this competency is actually not fully assessed in this assignment. So students would not have the opportunity to demonstrate mastery. If this was not the case, though, there are learning insights that could be drawn from these ratings. For example, perhaps the students are missing some prerequisite knowledge, and some supplemental instruction might be appropriate. Or maybe there are additional instructional interventions that could be offered. So, if you were seeing this in a formative assessment, you could, in the immediate time, you could tailor instruction to support students in moving toward mastery in this particular competency. So I'm hoping you're getting an idea of, all of the design and building. This is the other side of it where we can see the data coming through. So additional reporting that we can see is not just that the roster and how each student is performing individually, but we can see the breakdown in a pie chart for a particular competency or learning outcome. So if you look at this one in particular, this was a different. This was a competency on literature reviews and assessing strengths and weaknesses of this specific literature. And based on this report, this was during a beta test. We realized that students needed additional opportunities to conduct literature reviews. They weren't prepared to do it in this course, or a lot of them were not, because 47% of them were still approaching expectations. So there were some interventions that were considered. Maybe piloting a literature review writing course, or offering outside supports within the university on this, skill, or having additional literature review assignments added to other core courses that students would take prior to taking this course. So that's where curriculum mapping might come into play when we're looking at the results of the learning mastery reports in Canvas. We're going to begin wrapping up all of this. I'm hoping you're thinking through the work that it took to set this up and the results that we have gotten. And I'm going to just begin by mentioning that it was a challenging implementation, and there was a lot of room to reflect. So we started by reflecting on the role of outcomes assessment in the School of Public Health core and global public health courses. So for example, to start, it was definitely agreed upon that the assessment of mastery should not be added to assignment grades, because students might receive those approaches expectation ratings for competencies that are not fully addressed by a particular assignment or even within a particular course. A mastery rating, as we had said earlier, is an inference that is made about a specific learning outcome or competency based on performance on a particular assignment. It is a measure really of the instructional effectiveness and any prerequisites leading up to that assignment. So we should be really looking at them with an eye toward improving our instruction and how we design our assessments. The expectation is that students will achieve their program competencies by the successful completion of their degree program. So again, understanding that mastery is not always where we're at a given point in time. So more support that this should not be part of the grading. As we speak about the idea that these competencies the ratings we're giving are not part of the grading, we need to also consider that the role of competencies in instruction and the way we're implementing these competencies in rubrics should be clearly communicated to students. They should understand that it does not impact their grade. And hopefully also they should be making those connections, the same connection that they were making looking in the syllabus when they're seeing that an assignment is aligning with competencies, it can be reinforced in the competencies appearing in the rubrics. Additional reflection opportunity here on reporting. So what is the value of learning insights offered by the Learning Mastery Gradebook? We can start by saying it allows faculty to see whether the assessments in their courses offer students an opportunity to demonstrate mastery. We might determine that the assignments or the assessments are maybe only a partial opportunity to demonstrate mastery. Instruction is more responsive also if we look at the reporting, especially if we're looking at it while the course is being delivered, but also after. So instructors can make changes immediately, or they can make changes to future iterations of the course, or they can offer outside support. We had mentioned to improve mastery of competencies. Faculty can see student progress, this is another piece, throughout the curriculum, starting from core courses through to their capstone. And finally, reporting allows the Office of Academic Affairs to assess the effectiveness of the degree programs in meeting their competencies. So there's, again, a lot to reflect on when implementing outcomes assessment through the outcomes tool in Canvas. And finally, some future goals. These are some takeaways. Consider task 1 that reviewing student mastery data can be a place where we identify, again, areas for improvement in course delivery, in program supports, and in curriculum overall. We can also consider that it is an important piece, even though we've tried to create a faculty community and provide professional development. After the fact, we need to collect faculty feedback on how this went, on the implementation, and their perception of the value of this exercise moving forward. Another perhaps unanticipated goal is to consider implementations for how we might design assessment across sections of the same course. So we might move forward with sharing rubrics, again, part of the faculty community that we're developing. So if more than one instructor is teaching the same section, there might be some value in having consistency in rubrics. Although the assignments might be a little bit different, the rubrics could be similar. We definitely need to assess whether the norming was successful and consider whether there are any ways to improve norming, whether it requires more effort to get everybody on the same page for those mastery scales. And finally, last but definitely not least, is if we have found some value and we're already thinking about how these competencies and rubrics might work across different sections of the same course, there might also be value for quality control possibilities when we are offering courses and programs in different modalities. So looking at competencies and mastery in a fully online program, a fully face-to-face program, and modalities in between. And that's pretty much it for my description of this research project on how the Rutgers School of Public Health implemented the Canvas outcomes tool to improve instruction and to also begin to look at program level, curricular level possibilities moving forward. Thank you, everyone. I'm putting up contact information. If you want to reach out to any of us, we're happy to talk to you about this research that we did and give you any guidance or any feedback we have for you if you are going on this assessment journey of using the Canvas outcomes tool. Thank you, everyone.